Good morning and welcome to the SCRD. We have many agendas today. The first in front of us is the Committee of the Whole for Thursday, November 14th, 2024, and I'd like to acknowledge we are within the territories of the Sechelt and Squamish Nations. Before we get started, I'd like to welcome our new Senior Manager of Protective Services, Andrew Bellamy. Good morning. Now, an agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt? Moved, seconded? Anything further? Any changes? Not seeing any? Calling the question, all in favor? We have an agenda. Thank you. I'd also appreciate a motion to receive all reports and communications. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Great. We have a full agenda. All right. First thing up this morning is a delegation from Mr. Tim Rockford of West Howe Sound Fire Protection Boundary Expansion Group regarding the West Howe Sound Fire Protection proposed boundary expansion. You are up.
Thank you, Chair, and the entire SCRD team for allowing us to present.
And I'm
today.
just, sorry, I meant to make a brief reminder to everyone that our general time limit for presentations is 10 minutes, and that we do not make motions based on presentations as a matter of policy at the board. Thank you very much. Sorry.
No problem. My name is Tim Rockford, and I am the community lead for this community initiative to look at what is really required to try to expand the fire protection service area to encompass this area of West Howe Sound that is kind of an anomaly within the SCRD. It's an area of moderate population, but it does not have currently formal fire protection. So I wanted to briefly go to a map that I find very useful. It's page 4 of the presentation. Right here. This is a residential suitability map that the SCRD had published earlier. I find it very useful because it clearly shows the West Howe Sound area. And it also shows this area, which I've highlighted in magenta here, that I'm also indicating with my cursor. That is this area of West Howe Sound that does not currently have fire protection. This area is also directly adjacent to the town of Langdale, directly adjacent. Also, it is very close to our main ferry terminal. And also you can see in here the area of the town of Gibsons, and here is the approximate location, if you can see with my cursor, where the main Gibsons Fire Hall is located. That would be the logical fire hall to service this area as well. So we have, I'm a longtime property owner in this area, and I'm also within the town of Gibsons proper. But anyway, my family has spent significant time and effort over the years to improve our property here within West Howe Sound. And the property is currently known as Elphinstone Crossing. We also plan to retain significant lots within this property development for our long-term family residences for myself and my kids. Also, though, during the last 20 years, there has been significant, slow but steady development of parcels in this area, really kind of reflective of the residential suitability map. You can see that large areas here are identified as either most suitable or moderately suitable for residential development. We also have ALR lands in this area. But I think it's a very useful map to put this into context to understand really what we're talking about here. So We have worked as part of this community initiative with Fire Chief Michaels from the Gibsons and District Volunteer Fire Department. And the process is, that we've been going through is an initial feasibility assessment. That information was discussed at a fire commission meeting recently. And one of the next steps, I think as we see it from a community standpoint, is that that initial feasibility assessment needs to really be fully completed in a formal way, so that way we can make an informed choice of what is really required in terms of any capability additions and so forth, so that the fire department could serve our area effectively. We know that there is a cost associated with that. It's estimated from SCRD staff to be around $35,000. We know that's not trivial, and so, but once again, the community in this area, the community members in this area are very concerned about not having fire protection and are willing to contribute the cost to completing this study. And also, if there are capability requirements that need to be added or augmented to the Gibsons Fire Department through tax levies and so forth, that would be targeted to communities, to properties in this area, that would be included in that expanded fire protection area, that we understand that those costs would and should be borne primarily by those properties and property owners that benefit. So we, at this point, this area is very close to the Gibsons Fire Hall. It's within that approximately 8-kilometer boundary that's usually looked at here. But as far as key next steps, we would like to formally request that the completion of the formal feasibility assessment be completed now or in short order, so early 2025. The local community that is in this area, we would, through donations, we would pay for this study, and we want to work in close coordination with the SCRD to understand what is required to provide service in this area, and then discuss next steps for moving forward to implementing that in a reasonable time frame. So at this point, I will pass it over to my son, if he's available. He's a student at UBC. He was going to hopefully be with us today, but he had to go back to school. So if Colton is here, can I pass it off to him?
Yeah. Hi there. So I guess I'll talk about my perspective as a youth on this now. Actually, could you stop screen sharing?
Yep.
All right. Hi there. So joining from UBC today, I guess I'll start with a little bit of context. I'm Tim Rockford's son. I've been working with him on this land development since I was about 12 or 13. I've fallen in love with the area over time as we drive there, especially in the fall and spring. I see sort of the misty mountain aesthetic that it has, but as we all know, as we get into the summer, it turns very dry. And throughout Elphinstone Crossing and the West Howe Sound area, there is a great need for increased fire protection, both for protecting the assets that already exist and allowing for increased development of the area as we continue to create new lots and people move into the area. So if we allow for fire protection around there, it will help people, all the people living there already, to not have to worry about fire protection on their own, especially with increased risk of wildfires over the last few years. And as people move in now, it will allow them to live there in peace and not deal with increased fire insurance costs and everything associated with that. And as someone who intends to live there myself in the future, I see great value in providing fire protection to the region and allowing for the betterment of the area overall in the future. So again, thanks for having me, and I guess we'll open it up to questions from you.
Thank you. Do any of the directors have questions for the delegation? Director Stanford.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm just wondering, with Elphinstone Crossing, how many properties are there, and what kind of fire protection have you implemented to date on your own initiative?
There will be ultimately 21 properties on that district lot. These are acreage lots. We have tried to implement fire-safe principles where we can. That includes clearing and moving back the forest line appropriately, while also still trying to respect nature. I have my own fire pump that I utilize. There have been some ponds that have been created. But honestly, where it gets down to, a property owner can only do so much. Clearly, when we talk about really trying to provide formal fire services, we need to work with the greater body. In this case, the SCRD and the local fire department, because clearly the equipment required, the trained staff, volunteer fire departments, volunteer firefighters, they really need to come to bear. And so, to me, I think it's how can we partner effectively from our local community with the greater SCRD and the Gibson's fire department to provide these services. We recognize that there will probably need to be water tendering, just like I've discussed with the Roberts Creek Fire Chief, Chief Higgins. I met with him. They have good capabilities, and honestly, that area of Upper Roberts Creek is very similar to our area, and so that's really what we think where this would logically head. There's probably going to be some apparatus required. Once again, the community residents in this area would be happy to pay. Happy to pay for those increased capabilities as they're required, and it'd be through a tax levy. Oh, and it's definitely, sorry, that's my wife, but it's definitely bigger than, Elphinstone Crossing is just one area here. This entire area is YMCA Camp Elphinstone. It's a number of other properties, Williamson's Landing, the Langdale Heights RV Park, areas directly adjacent to the town of Gibson's and the elementary school there. That's how close that boundary is between service and non-service. And we're within that area of approximately 8 kilometers from the fire hall, and we just want to partner with the SCRD. So,
Thank you. Are there any other questions from directors? Because if not, oh, sorry. Yes, your hand is up. I beg your pardon.
Thank you for your concern over your community. I'm wondering. I have questions for staff about this, but have you looked into finding volunteers to populate this fire department? Because I know that most of the people that are serving the area will need to be living in the area, and that recruitment is a challenge in fire departments these days. And so I think if you don't want to put the cart before the horse, you've got to find people to populate this fire hall.
Thank you for the question. So, as far as volunteers, I'm sure that there would be some volunteers from this area that would be willing to contribute. I can say for myself, I would be happy to be a volunteer firefighter, and some of my family members. I can't speak for others within the overall community, but I would expect that there definitely would be some. So I don't think that we really view this as being a high lift. This is a relatively small area that we're talking about, but I recognize the need for some additional volunteer firefighters, and I can say for myself and my family, I have 2 boys, girl, my wife, we would do our part. But this is really not about Elphinstone Crossing. This is about the greater area that we're talking about here. And I do think that there would be people that would step up to provide a volunteer firefighter staffing ads there as appropriate. So.
Thank you. Director Lee.
It's a curiosity question. There's not necessarily fire hydrants in the area right now. And so I take it that the Gibsons and district doesn't have tendering capability. They don't have tankers already. From the presentation, that sounded correct. Is that correct? And if it is, $35,000 doesn't seem like enough to add that capability. I'd wonder what would cost to add
I
that
think the
capability.
confusion is that the 35,000 is for the study. It's not for the expansion of the service. Yeah. 35,000 wouldn't buy much in a fire department these days.
Yeah, if I can just comment briefly. Yes, the 35,000 is only, as the chair has said, is only for the feasibility study, the formal feasibility assessment. As far as water tendering, yes, that would come out of the feasibility assessment of what equipment would be required, and also looking at any kind of high-speed pumps, and if there needs to be water storage tanks. Those would be to come out of the feasibility study.
Yes, it's just I didn't realize that Gibson's and District didn't have that capability already. Probably unique on the coast, I would guess.
I'm not going to comment on that. I think we don't want to go down too many rabbit holes because we have a lengthy agenda this morning. Director Bax.
I just wanted to let the Director Lee know that if he needs any more information about that type of thing, I've taken that course, and I can fill him in later at lunch.
Lovely. Well, we'll have another lunch and learn. So I'm at the end of my questions list. Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Rockford, for your presentation. And both Mr. Rockfords.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, first report on our agenda this morning is the 2025 meeting schedule. And our Deputy Corporate Officer is up for this.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Legislative Services have put forward this report and calendar to assist in planning for the coming year's meetings. Of note is that since publication of this report on today's agenda, the LGLA, or Local Government Leadership Academy, has released the dates of their annual leadership forum, which is scheduled from March 12th to 14th. That's a conflict with our first committee and board meetings for March in 2025, which is March 13th. The board may wish to cancel that meeting now, or those meetings now rather, if they anticipate the need, but you can always cancel any future meetings by way of resolution at a later date. So I'm happy to answer any questions or make any amendments to the calendar as you see fit. Thank you.
Thank you. I am not in a rush to start amending the meeting schedule. I'm not seeing a lot of hands for other people getting excited about this either. So thank you very much. We have received for information. Wait, we need a motion in order to adopt. Director Toth, seconded by the Director. Thank you. All in favor? That passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're almost set for next year. Next up, the exciting report of the day, high water users for Chapman and South Pender Water Services. Over to GM Rosenboom.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm here today physically alone, but mentally not, because Graham Sarchage, our Water Sustainability Coordinator, is joining us remotely, given that his medical condition was such that he felt better to stay at home to make us not all sick. So, and I'm very appreciative of him joining us anyway. So the board asked us to bring back information on the high water users in the Chapman system and South Pender system based on the data from 2023. The board also asked us to see if we can expedite the implementation of volumetric billing to these properties. So as part of this report, we included the definition of what we consider, what we're supposed to consider to be a high water user. And we present some options for the board to consider in terms of implementation of volumetric billing to these properties. It should be noted that high water users are using a lot of water compared to other users. At the top 1%, the top 5%. Top 5% is over 30% of all the entire use of these the water in these systems. Transferring, especially those in South Pender, over early would result in them having two different type of rate structures, most likely within 2 years' time, 2025 an updated rate structure based on the current metered rates, and in 2026, then based on volumetric billing. So that might result in some confusion, and at the same time, it will require staff time to implement any changes to our systems and communicate that to the residents prior to an implementation of January 1st. And report outlines what those implications could be for staffing. We're here, staff are here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say this is a very illuminating report. I absolutely love the graph on page 21 for Chapman there, which demonstrates something that the average figures don't tell us, which is that almost 60% of the residences on the Chapman system are using 200 liters a day or less. So a lot of people, the vast majority of our residents are being very responsible about their water use. It's not until you have that, I won't say a hockey stick graph, but until you get to the very end that a small percentage, less than 5%, who are using a huge amount of water. I found that very interesting. The other thing I found interesting was how many of the very large users probably have leaks, which is also interesting. So I presume that a number of I had to look up CF a few times, continuous flow. A number of the users on page 26, I assume, have been contacted about their water use and potential leaks. Is that the case?
I think Graham, Mr. Starchase is better able to answer this question.
Yeah, so we're looking at attachment A, page 26. Can everyone hear me?
Yes,
Right.
we can hear you. Thank you.
That table is the top 50 metered rate properties, which means those are properties are already paying volumetrically. So when that report first came forward, we divided the metered rate from the flat rate properties to present that data to you. So with a metered rate property, generally they're commercial, right? We've discussed this before already. So what that means with the continuous flow, why we use that language, is because that's how the meter reads the flag it gives us, like our technology, right? So for us to consider something a leak, it means that every 15 minutes, all in 96 segments in a 24-hour day, for 15 days straight, flow is registered, right? Because we never know what's happening with the water. We just know that the meter is registering flow all the time. So those top 50 meter rate properties there are commercial properties which use likely a high volume of water for their activities. What we can't tell, except unless we go to site and do a detailed investigation, is what percent of the total volume used in a day is related to potential loss, like through a leaking pipe or a leaking toilet or a leaking appliance, and what is used in just regular consumption, right? So that's why you will see that the large high using properties, the metered rate properties, often have a continuous flow flag because they're an industry, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. Maybe they have legitimate water use, or maybe they have a lot of appliances, or it could be a hotel with lots of rooms, right? Or a resort, or it could be an aggregate washing facility. So in terms of the flat rate properties, which are page 28 and 29 for the Chapman and South Pender system, what we did is, when we brought this table forward to you originally, you'll see that when we filtered the data, we selected just the highest using flat rate properties, so generally residential. And yes, those were, you see there's a lot of leak flags there. So, and that was, we have to filter just based on a specific period. So those were leak flags in August of 2023, because that's when we had water scarcity and we wanted to look at that data specifically. But then we ran a filter again to show you what if they were still showing a leak in September of 2024. And you guys see that there's many of those properties aren't leaking anymore. And that's a direct result of our leak resolution program, the direct mail, the communications, and our follow-up with those properties. So we do have a follow-up that we do with the top metered properties, which is an incentive because you could save money when you're paying volumetrically to reduce your leaks. So I'll end there.
Thank you. So just a follow-up question on that. So of those properties on page 28, a number of them, having resolved their leaks, may no longer be in the top 25 for 2024. Is that the case?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. That's a good news story. Thank you very much. Director Gabios.
Thank you, Chair. And just looking at page 26, those metered properties, would it be fair to assume that some of these might be commercial institutions that have those continuous flow refrigeration? I don't know what they're called technically, but.
Thank you. Flow-through equipment. I think that's what you're referring to. It could be. Some of them might. Most of the, however, there could be some flow-through equipment on resulting in high water use, but based on the information we have so far, that's definitely not the majority of the instances. It's definitely actual use.
Thank you. I'm just going to refresh my memory. I know we had a discussion about potentially shifting high water users to volumetric billing earlier, but I don't think we made an actual decision on that, did we?
Thank you. I'm not sure where the echo is coming from, but I'll try to answer your question regardless. No, the motion on the table was to explore opportunities. And that's why this report presents options for the board to consider, instead of that it's actually making a recommendation to do something.
Yep.
Because it was explore opportunities and the implications. So that's what this report is trying to provide. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have three options ahead of us. Option one is basically do nothing. So if we do nothing, nothing happens. And then there's option two and option three. Personally, having seen the information here, I think the amount of benefit to be gained from an early transfer of high water users is really not worth it in terms of what the benefit, because there would be a lot of staff time involved, and I'm not sure that it would accomplish very much. But over to Director Gabios.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have the same feeling. I think this would add a layer of complexity to an already complex project, the volumetric billing project. And our goal, I think, is to get to volumetric billing as fast as possible. And reading that this would actually delay potentially the implementation of volumetric billing makes it not so palatable to me. But I really thank you, staff, for all this work. I know this was a lot of work. And I'm hoping that there's ways that we can use this information, whether it's like supporting, like doubling down on leak resolution or education or reaching out and follow-ups with these the residents or the commercial entities. Anyway, yeah, like how can we actually work towards reducing the water use without going through the rigmarole of moving them to volumetric billing? This is a
Thank
question
you.
we should try to answer today.
Don't think that was a question. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate seeing this report. I appreciate this report coming to a public meeting so that, you know, the community can have a conversation about some of this consumption as well. And we might be able to encourage people to change their habits if they recognize their properties on this list without having to specifically name and shame anybody. Before the report came out, I was pretty ready to just go forth with moving some of these properties over. But recognizing the work that we're trying to do with the prioritization, the fact that it could slow down overall metering, I think I as well support just sort of leaving it for the moment. If we find that it is disruptive or that there are problems, we can always revisit it at a later point. So certainly I'm less concerned about the Pender system users than I am about the Chapman water system. Yeah, I think I'll just leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bax.
Yeah, I have to echo what the other directors are saying, and I would hope that staff can use this report as fodder for public education. So do I need to make a motion to do nothing? Is that right? Is that
No, I think the absence of a motion will also do nothing.
excellent? I like that.
I just had one additional question for staff, though. It's evident to me from seeing this chart that our figure for the average water use is severely skewed by the high-end users. How difficult would it be to also have the median use figure produced? Because that would tell us what is more common for properties.
That would be not that difficult to do.
That would be lovely. Perhaps in the next quarterly report, we could get the median as well as the average. That would be terrific. So I'm not seeing any hands up. We get to do nothing. This is awesome. Thank you so much for this report. We really appreciate it. Next up is the South Coast Residential Greenways Drop-Off Depot Operations Contract Extension. Manager Soul.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. So as many of you know, we operate the South Coast Greenways Depot in the Gibsons area. Are we going to go back to the metal one? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was flipping through the pages rather than the order. Yep. Well, you're up anyway. For metal containers hauling and recycling services contract extension.
Yeah, thank you. So as you all know, we have our metal recycling program at our solid waste facilities, and before you is a contract extension for this service. I'll say we're happy with the service that we've been getting from Sailor Soils, and so before you is an extension that we have as permitted under the contract.
Thank you. And this is just a curiosity question, because I remember a few years ago, people were tearing copper plumbing out of people's homes and stealing it because metal prices were so high. I take it, are they still high?
Thank you for the question and through the chair. They are high, but I don't think we're quite at the same highs that we saw when people were stealing copper out of everything they could get out of. But yeah, they're still up relative to that.
Thank you. Director Bax.
Yeah, they jumped up a lot, copper especially, and then it's kind of stabilized a little bit, but it's still high. My question is that this contract is, so we pay Salish to bring metal scrap to the city, and then they receive money back for that. Is there any return that the SCRD gets from that?
Thank you for the question and through the chair. So the way the contract is set up is that Salish basically provides the bin they take material to their site just down the road from the landfill. They consolidate, bulk, try and squish it down as much as they can. Then they transport it to the city to a scrap metal recycler. And then the SCRD has an arrangement with that scrap metal recycler to get the metal revenue, so to speak. So the contract is purely for the bin rental, the hauling, that consolidation and bulking that happens, but we get the actual revenue from the metal under a separate arrangement.
Sure.
And can you give me a dollar value on that revenue?
Thank you for the question. I can't right now, and it does fluctuate month to month. What I can say is that it doesn't cover our contract costs that we pay for the hauling and everything. So the metal doesn't have full cost recovery, and that might be relative to just the tip fee that we have to charge to capture the material right now.
I just want to figure out, just because the revenue that comes back is going to be taken off of this contract cost, and it's just a curiosity to see what the whole program is costing us. It's a lot it's less than what's shown in this contract extension.
Yes, it's partially subsidized. Director Gabius.
Just looking to move the recommendations on page 31.
And I see a seconder. And no more hands are up. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor? That passes. Thank you very much. Now we can get to the exciting green waste drop-off contract extension.
Hi, and thank you for the opportunity. So the SCRD has a contract with Salish Oils to operate land that we lease from the town of Gibsons in the Gibsons area to have the South Coast Green Waste Drop-Off Depot. The site is purely there for residential and now small commercial drop-off of green waste, primarily meant for the Gibsons and surrounding electoral areas. And so before you is a contract extension for the operation of the depot with Salish Soils as permitted under the contract. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Director Bax.
Oh, I'm just going to move the recommendations as they appear on page 33. Okay.
And that's seconded. Thank you. I do have a related question, which is there any plan to evaluate this service and also the recycling depot, because there was an issue with the site? And so is there a process underway at this time?
Yes, thank you for the question. So I'll answer the recycling depot question first. And yes, there is a sort of a timeline underway, and the board will be seeing something in the first half of next year related to recycling depots and what our options are there. In terms of the South Coast Green Waste Depot, we're trying to resolve our long-term disposal issue right now. And as the board is aware, we have a feasibility study underway that's looking at both expansion at the landfill, but also waste export. And so until that study is done, we don't quite know exactly what we might need in the Gibsons area there. It's possible that if we do have to export waste, we might be looking at a transfer station of some kind, which could also accommodate green waste potentially. So part of the analysis that'll happen will be sort of a next step after we've decided on our disposal option there.
Okay, and a further question. Do we track the traffic at that depot? Because I know that since Salish has been managing it, it seems to have sped up some, the traffic through there, but still, on popular weekends, that we get quite the traffic jam at that site.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we're not tracking number of customers per se. We do track the tonnage at the site, but that's not always an indicator of number of visits that we're seeing there. You know, anecdotally, we've certainly heard, like you have, that the site is more popular. You know, it is often an unmanned site, and so there's incentive for people to want to go there as opposed to more manned facilities if they feel they have an easier means of getting rid of their green waste. So this will be part of the analysis that we do once we sort of understand our options around what we might be looking at for this green waste depot relative to a waste export transfer station, is what our needs are in the area.
Thank you. And as the director for the area, we really do need to manage the traffic somewhat better, I think. That what tends to happen on nice weekends in the fall and spring is that a lot of people rush there towards the end of the day, trying to get in before the end of the day, and then tempers get short. And I've heard anecdotally of fist fights between people in the lineup. So it does need some attention. So thank you. We do have a motion on the floor. I see no further hands, so I'm calling the question. All in favor? Thank you. That passes. And we are moving on fairly briskly, thank heavens, through the morning's agenda. And we are now at 911 Radio Consulting Services Agreement Value Adjustments Amendment. All right. And it's over to GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, SCRD utilizes the services of a telecommunications engineer as part of delivering the 911 service, and demand for the service from that consultant is running slightly above what was forecast. And so this report seeks a contract amendment to increase the value of the contract we have with our service provider. And as noted in the report, project funding is in place to support this increase. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bax.
Yeah, thank you. 5% increase is kind of almost in line with inflation, almost. I move the recommendations as they appear on page 36.
And I see a seconder. No further questions or discussion? All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you very much. We are now moving on to the departmental quarterly reports. The board is soliciting some feedback on these reports in terms of what directors find most valuable in these reports. So as you have questions or comments, I would appreciate feedback that you have on what it is in these reports that you turn to as the most interesting or key points of information that you're looking for, and whether you do indeed need them on a quarterly basis. And so I myself am, one of my go-tos is on page 44 of the planning report, which is public inquiries, because they peaked a couple of years ago, and it's really interesting to me to see what the volume of inquiries we're getting. The building permit processing time is another one I look at. I appreciated the photos, the Green Shores training, and the floodplain mapping photos. That was interesting. I was not aware we were doing Green Shores training, so that's great. We've got certainly areas that qualify for that. I always look at the fire department callouts because that's important. It's a little frustrating because each fire department tracks them differently, so it's hard to do any kind of a comparison. And on page 77, there was a mention of payment hearings, and I have no idea what a payment hearing is. I was wondering if I could be... Yeah, a payment hearing has been scheduled at the courthouse to collect costs associated with outstanding bylaw tickets. Do we have any idea what that is? I don't.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. I can give a general answer and can follow up with more detailed information. But a payment hearing is a court order for payments, which may be on a schedule, related to outstanding penalties. And it's a tool that can be used as a progressive enforcement strategy that can help where additional tickets are unlikely to support a path to compliance. And it's referenced in the progressive enforcement approach, including legal action like this, is referenced in the board's bylaw enforcement policy. And I'll just say that its use by staff is always in the context of what is the most effective, thoughtfully deployed approach to achieving compliance. And it considers things like past, what's happened in the past on the file, the nature of the infractions, do they involve life safety or environmental degradation, et cetera. So very carefully deployed by professional officers. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions on the planning? Director Gabius.
Not a question, but more feedback on these quarterly reports, if I may. And I think that's pretty obvious, but I think any graphs or tables that show that we can determine what the trends are very useful. So comparing it to previous years, and then when there's a bit of an analysis as to, what staff thinks caused a spike or a reduction is also very useful, just to get like an idea of the bigger picture out there. I always find those very, very helpful.
Great. Thank you. Okay. I am going to move on to the Infrastructure Services Division quarterly report with all of our favorite graphs about water and waste. Just a minute. Of interest to everybody, I think, was page 81 and 2 is the progress of the water meter installation in Seashelt, which is 66% complete with nearly 3,000 meters installed in total. That's exciting news from our point. I was very interested in the Hopkins Landing Waterworks update, since that one is coming at us one of these days soon. I will note that on some of these updates, it tells us where the project is at, but it doesn't tell us when the project started. So we don't actually know whether the project has been going for 5 years and it was supposed to be finished in 2 years, or whether it's completely on schedule or what have you. Whether we need to know that is another question, or whether this is the right tool for that is also an open question. Page 94, the residential water use per property. Does that, woohoo? No, that's not going to work. That's one I think that all the directors look at. That's the one that I get with my monthly water update from the SCRD. So always of interest. And the number of appliances, I find it fascinating how many appliances and mattresses we receive at the landfill. Like, it's kind of gobsmacking, frankly, how much is getting thrown away. Well, recycled, yeah, more or less. And then finally, I really appreciate the graphs around page 102 about the food waste pickup and the garbage pickup and the trends in that too, because that's always of interest to us. Well, it is for me. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, very good information. Always good to see what's happening out there. And I'm wondering if any of the information, say with the water supply projects, which residents are very interested in, do we populate anything like Let's Talk, or where is this information going? Does it just stays in the quarterly report, or does it also get distributed to residents in other ways?
Thank you very much for the question through the chair. The information, the most recent updated information is available on the Let's Talk page. For example, for the drilling that's currently happening on the test wells in the Sechelt area, the site is frequently updated, almost daily. So, and for your information, the current setup, the drill setup is at Whittaker Park. So that's the next site we're drilling in upcoming days.
Director Bax?
Yeah, thank you. At the bottom of page 84, it talks about the fire flow action plan development and that there's been a hire in Q3, and so the work will advance. I'm just wondering if there is a outside timeline as to when we will hear, not a complete report, but when will we hear back from staff on this?
Staff?
Thank you for the question. There are several components to this work. One is a policy development component, and one is a more technical component, and we hope to provide more information on both in Q1 of 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. I did see Director Lee, but then he disappeared again. Does Director Lee have a question?
My first question was answered just before I got there, but I had a second question, and it's on page 100. I'm always interested in the tonnage landfilled, and it seems to keep going down each year. Do we attribute that to increased recycling, or do we know why it's going down? One would expect it to go up because we're getting more people, so that's good news.
I wondered that very same thing. Staff?
Thank you very much for your question. The tonnage between 2021, 2022, and 2023, there were indeed some differences in recycling services offered on the coast, implementation of the Green Bin program, some changes in recycling programs within the district of Sechelt. The queue we don't expect a large difference ultimately between Q4 for 2023 compared to 2024. So the total between the last 2 years, this year we expect in total to be getting the same amount as last year. And there is a pretty strong connection between economic activity and waste that we have to landfill. So if the economy goes up, usually the amount of materials that we get is going up as well. So that might be a big driver as well behind any fluctuations in amounts.
And I'm just wondering too whether COVID had any influence on that, whether there were a lot of people staying in their vacation homes in Pender Harbor during that time.
Yep.
Or renovating. Yes, I know. A lot of us had COVID projects.
Yeah.
So, okay, Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any questions. I appreciate the infrastructure services graphs, just providing my feedback on the quarterly reports. You know, I look at the graph on page 102 and 103 for the curbside garbage, and I think this graph keeps adding a year every year to try and show that step. And I appreciate that because, you know, when you get a couple of years into a program, you forget how much of a difference it can make in the community. And you look at the District to Sechelt drop-off, you look at the SCRD drop-off, like the town of Gibson's, you know, would have had a similar drop-off, but it's long ago enough now that it's off the charts. And I think when we're talking about trends and things like that, this is hugely useful information, even, you know, with COVID being 4 years ago at this point. Yeah, appreciate the charts, the graphs, everything visual. It's easy to share. It's easy to talk about. But yeah, no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I agree about sharing because I quite often pull images out of here and use them. Director Stanford.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't have any specific thoughts on the reports. I find them useful. As a question specifically comes up, then I know I can always go back to these for my constituents. So the more information, the better, because it comes out in different lenses. I do have a question or a comment about page 97 about the islands cleanup. I keep hoping to see those numbers go down, that we finally get through all the accumulated garbage that we find in the bush. Doesn't seem to be happening, but I'm wondering where in these years does Nelson Island get added to the islands cleanup? Does that account for some of the jumps in 22, 23?
Great question for staff.
Thank you for the question. I think that's a good memory check for me. I think it was added in 2022, so yes.
Great. You can blame Nelson Island now. Awesome. Any further questions on infrastructure? If not, we're going to move on to community services. My favorite thing in the community services is the emerging issues section. And I really would love that for all of the quarterly reports, because that's the sort of thing that we want to go to right away. Is there an emerging issue that we haven't already seen at the board table? It's nice not to be surprised. The community hall bookings are interesting, but I'm not sure we need it on a quarterly basis. Similarly with cemeteries, there's so little activity in our cemeteries for whatever reason. Page 116, cemeteries. That is a question I have. We had correspondence recently from the Jewish Burial Society, and I was wondering if there was any follow-up to that. They had concerns about the number of plots remaining for Jewish burials.
Good morning. Thank you. I accidentally turned off my computer, so I'm joining you from Remco Rosenboom's computer. Yes, we did receive correspondence, and they were interested in being part of a consideration for our expansion planning, and that we have reached out, and that will be a consideration of that planning. Thank you.
Great to hear. Thank you very much.
Point of order. I asked that Philip Paul shut his video off before somebody has a seizure. Thank you.
I don't think we need a break right now. We're going to need a break before we go to in camera for sure. All right, I'm missing all the excitement, clearly. Transit, I always look at the ridership figures. They're really interesting. That said, on page, and I also look at the on-time performance, and I realize that it's mostly and completely out of our control. We can see what happens to our highway in the summer is reflected really clearly on the on-time transit stats. I'm not sure why I need to know how many buses get cleaned, but the UMO stats on page 149, I take it this is replacing the former monthly passes information, but what I was really curious about is how many people are paying by UMO now versus cash. Any comments from staff?
Thank you for the question. I can't give an exact number, but what I could do is suggest that you could make an inference between two charts. So the chart that's on page 148 shows total fare revenue, and the chart that is on page 149 shows UMO sales. If you add those together, that's total fare revenue. If you note the fare revenue that we're receiving and the values of that versus what we're receiving in UMO, you can see that lots of people are still choosing to pay cash. And until October, we were still selling the tickets as well, and that's now gone. So we are seeing our UMO numbers fluctuate in terms of sales. And, over time, it's going to take time to build that up, but people are still paying more cash than anything. And in general, I'll take the opportunity to make a remark that our revenue is significantly higher than our budget. In fact, year to date, we've almost reached our annual target. So revenue sales, fare sales, which is in turn ridership, is up, which is good news.
That's great to know, thank you. So the graph on page 148 is only cash fare revenue and does not include UMO. Okay, it doesn't say that on the chart. Maybe that should be updated to say cash fare revenue. Director Stanford.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, I know the student fare program through UMO is just starting. Just wondering if there's any anecdotal information about the uptake on it. I've been hearing about lineups to get their emo set up, so I'm just wondering how we're doing with that.
Staff.
Thank you for the question. I believe we had a press release just recently, but I love the opportunity to just give you a quick update. So no, there were no lines. It was slow and steady. I was there on a Saturday, and I was there for 3.5 hours, and I had 4 people come. So we have some learnings on how we're going to implement the program again next year. The good news is, normally we sell, as you would see in our statistics, around 100 youth passes a month. We have activated 330 youth passes with fare-free transit, which is great news. So obviously, big uptake. It is significantly more than we budgeted for and thought for. So that's still great news in terms of uptake. Anecdotally, lots of the youth that came forward that got passes were not regular bus riders, but they were interested in potentially trying it out. And I would suggest that the implementation strategy that we did have, the biggest success was information and the opportunity to talk to youth. We had schedules there. We had, our bus routes in big poster size, and we were able to just talk about transit in general. So, and then the other good news was not just with youth, because we were at our rec centers, and so lots of parents were there. So a really good educational opportunity and quite a success in general. We'll be evaluating it in the next couple of months to think about what we might want to do differently next year with reports to come. And we will be analyzing the use data as much as we can with what information we can get from BC Transit as the months progress. Thank you.
Great to hear, Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. And anecdotally, I feel like I'm seeing a lot more youth on the bus going to Half Moon Bay. And I don't know if it's because my schedule's changed or what, but I'm seeing a lot more young folks on the bus, which is great. Question about the UMO sales. So on page 149, it's the monthly sales. So if I'm to add cash on my UMO app, is this considered a cash fare?
Thank you for the question, and I believe so. We will be changing our reporting next year because we're reporting in mechanisms that we are having struggles getting the information for, so we're going to change how we report in our quarterly reports next year. Thank you.
Director Inkster.
Either or is fine, Chair. I come to dinner on both. The pass piece is interesting, and I'm glad to hear that Director Gabius says that there's more going to Half Moon Bay. It sort of strengthens the argument to look at that route that we've been talking about to start increasing the West Seashell to Half Moon Bay bus service. I'll keep talking about that. I did see the press release last week to see how many, I guess it's student passes, we'll call it, that were on the uptake, and it'll be interesting to see how many are. And I also did see the booth table slash table at the Gibson's Rec Center. I'm assuming there was one at the Seashell Aquatic Center as well. I didn't know the GM was there that day, but good for her if she was as well with the staff member that was there. It was very prominent, and it was interesting to see that there wasn't a lineup at that table to get something for free. So I was surprised, but I guess as people, the kids talk to each other, there'll be more uptake on something that I think is a really wise addition to our transit offerings. Thanks.
I just had talking of things that are free. Do we have any sense of how many people are using the Next Bus app?
No, I don't think we can get that information.
Would be interesting because that's very helpful, especially given our challenges with on-time performance. Director Gabius. Director Bax hasn't spoken yet.
Haven't spoken yet. My question is more of a, I really think that engaging the youth is a super important part of this, and it looks like it's starting to happen. But I believe that the regional district and the board can engage youth on many more layers than we already are. I really like the way that Gibson's Council had a youth counselor, and the fruition of this free transit for youth can be, you can look back and say, well, the youth counselor in Gibson's was one of the movers and shakers in this program, and so it's really interesting to see to have youth engagement. And I think we could have liaisons at all of the high schools that we worked with in order to communicate. I think that would be an interesting approach for the board to take.
Good. We'll have another project. Director Gabius.
Yeah, get some champions in the high schools. I'm curious about what's the calculation of how much the free transit for students is going to cost? Is it the number of passes, or is it the number of rides that we're now subsidizing? Like, how do we kind of, I don't know, who would be...
Is that a GM or is that a CFO question?
Thank you. We will be reporting back on the program, and youth passes or youth usage will be part of our quarterly report starting in 2025. That being said, the way we sell passes is the value of a pass. So we can't determine how much people will use their pass. They've bought the pass, and the value of the pass was $30. So that will be the value that's attributed to the quote unquote lost fare revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm assuming the director's hand is residual. Yeah, I just finally wanted to say that I really appreciated the table on page, there's a hole in the hole punch, the table of leases for the docks, because that kind of information about dates is helpful, and I find myself often looking for dates. And I'm not sure how we can better manage that, but like when there's facilities, I often want to know when they were built, and it's hard to find that information. It's really hard. And so things like leases that are coming up, or in our financials, we get the table of when various debt matures and that sort of thing, so that we can kind of have a big picture look. So I really appreciate that kind of information, so thank you. And we seem to have run out of hands. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. It's less a question and more an observation. It looks like our Q3, well, it looks like our 2024, yeah, at least Q3, bookings for our community halls and our rec facilities are way up, which appears to be a good news story. I'm just looking for confirmation if the community halls is a recovery of sort of pre-COVID numbers, or if it is actually trending in a more positive direction. Thank you.
Have we bounced back?
Thank you. I'm sure there's a combination of both, but I want to take the opportunity to acknowledge that the board invested resources in a facility booking specialist that does focus on our sports fields, our community halls, our parks, and I think this is also reflective of the work that that position has done to connect with community and promote the facilities. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. Find my cover page again. So, next up on our agenda is the minutes from the Regional Accessibility Advisory Committee. Is there anything from there that needs to be brought forward? I didn't see anything right off the top, but I'm just checking. None of the recommendations seem like we need to pay attention. They were procedural. Okay, seeing no hands, next we have the minutes of the Fire Commission from October 21st, 2024. And these minutes are slightly more descriptive, as the comment was made that it would be helpful to understand the context of some of the recommendations. So thank you to Chief Michael for expanding a little on the minutes without going wild. Director Stanford.
Yes, first my apologies, Chair, because I'm not sure about the process on this, but there are a couple of recommendations in these minutes that I do want to make sure are moved forward. Do we wait for staff report to come back on these recommendations, or do we move them forward now?
What a great question. Corporate Officer, you're looking eager.
Yes. So should the board wish to action these, the committee should pull them for recommendation, and then they'll go to board and be adopted, and then staff would act upon them. So you should pull them for consideration.
Follow up?
Yes, thanks.
So based on that advice, I would like to pull recommendation 3 and recommendation 4 on page 161.
Fine, that's good.
For consideration.
And recommendation 3, I also agree that perhaps a little, it may not be completely self-explanatory from the wording. Did you wish to speak to that one?
I think all I can speak to is during the meeting, there was a lot of discussion about how to expand through an expansion for Area F as per our earlier presentation. And what came back was that staff provide alternatives to providing fire protection for in recommendation 3. So that's where it's that was the recommendation at that point, but we did not forward recommendations about expansion of Area F specifically.
If you don't mind, I'll just add a little bit too, because no matter what happens with the petition, the service will not be expanded anytime soon, not immediately. So the question was, what are people doing in other parts of the province for fire protection in unprotected areas? And I think it's a good question. It's becoming a lot more topical right now. Did you wish to move that recommendation?
Yes, I'd like to move it as presented. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, we have a seconder. Does the seconder have to be in the service or not?
Yes, they should be a service participant to move in second.
In that case, I'll second it, since I'm in the service. All right, Director Bax, did you have a question?
Well, I just want to point out that I think this is a wonderful opportunity for our new Senior Manager of Protective Services to get involved in. I really look forward to seeing what comes of this. You know, I know that you know that fire service is really close to my heart. Really. And I look forward to seeing what can be done for the good people of West Howe Sound.
Thank you. Your hand is still up, but okay. Motion on the floor, not seeing any further hands about this motion, so I'm calling I think we all vote on this, do we not? Because this is being brought forward to Cal.
Thank you, Chair. While at committee, it would just be the service participants that would move this recommendation forward to board.
Aha, and there's the other service participant. So any questions, Director White?
Just waiting to vote.
All right, calling the question. All in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
I do have a question now.
Director White.
I have a question now. I mean, the whole fire commission's always a little confusing because it's not actually a commission of the SCRD. Technically, it's a joint commission. So to me, the governance is confusing when it's then, you know, asking the SCRD to do things. But I guess that's how it's always been with recommending budgets and things like that. But should we not then? I don't think in the past we've necessarily had a practice of endorsing the commission's recommendations. But if we are doing that now, should we not be endorsing all of them? Sorry, there's a can of worms here, but identify it.
Yes, but many of these recommendations were just procedural, like receiving reports for information. So there's
internal, okay.
Yeah, there's no need for us to look at them. The only two that apply to the service as opposed to the commission are recommendation 3 and 4.
And we just passed those two as one block.
No, we just dealt with recommendation 3, and now Director Stanford is going to speak to recommendation 4.
Okay, great, thanks.
Director Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. This one's a little more straightforward. Again, given our delegation this morning, there's a better frame for the request here, and that's that the Gibsons and District Fire Protection Commission recommend that cost-sharing opportunities be related to a study to inform a formal petition process be explored with results to be reported to the SCRD annual budget process.
You're moving that. Do we have a seconder? Good. It's seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm calling the question. All in favor? Thank you. That passes. And there was nothing further in that report. Next one up is the VICC Virtual Climate Summit. Did Director Gabius have anything?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I know we've got a lot of stuff to read these days, but I would really encourage directors to have a good look at this. This was an amazing summit. It was virtual. It was earlier this year. Well attended, great discussions. And there, if I understand correctly, this year there will not be a summit. There might be a call with just to kind of do an update or share information. And there would be another summit in 2026, if I understand correctly. So really encourage you to have a look at this. And we do have a steering committee meeting later this month. We'll see Director McMahon there.
We do, although, of course, we are going to refresh all our liaisons to committees and board chairs or committee chairs. I am going to, before we go in camera, Director White,
Oh.
sorry. I
Sorry,
missed
just a
you.
point of order here. I'm trying to listen and somebody's mic is on. There's lots of whispering going on. I can't just, yeah, so I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think what I could do is consider a motion to go in camera under section 91K and M of the Community Charter. Is that moved? Moved, seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And then I'm going to just check if there are any questions from the gallery before we take a break. There are no participants in the virtual gallery. I'm not seeing any public questions, so we are going to take a break and return at 11. Thank you. Thank you. We are now resuming the Committee of the Whole meeting of the SCRD for Thursday, November the 14th, 2024. Do I see a motion to adjourn? Moved, seconded, all in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you. There's no one in the gallery because we have been in camera.